Hello, my friends. Thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me. Today, I'm going to be talking to Martin about why you should do marketing, why AI is not going to kill us all or may kill us all, and, all of those wonderful marketing things, because I think a lot of people are going to be potentially looking to cut their marketing budget if they haven't done so already, looking to scale maybe that back. And all I would ask you to consider is if you're going to watch this and consider why you should potentially change, tweak, adapt what you do in marketing. So thank you ever so much for coming back. If you did enjoy this episode and did take value from it, why not subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode? And I'll now hand over to past me to conduct this interview, and I'll see you in just a moment's time.
Yeah. My name is Martin Whiskin, and I'm a voiceover artist, and I help businesses, this is a fancy way of saying it, to connect with their audience on an emotional level.
That's a really important part. I was going to go into like why market as a whole, but I think, as you brought emotion into it, firstly, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for the time, etc., etc.
No worries.
But I think it's a important element to discuss why emotion as a whole is important when it comes to marketing or content or how we articulate ourselves, because I think that's sometimes what we sometimes miss, especially in the paid ad world, where it's very, here's a product, hey, person, yeah, you may want this, yeah, it's really cool, come and buy it, thanks, right? But what role would you say that emotional connection, or that thought process around emotional context?
The sort of thing that you just mentioned is very cold, and it's very sort of old school car salesman type stuff. It's like everyone's trying to shout the loudest, and everything sort of blurs into one thing. Then who's shouting the loudest in the most ridiculous way, and it lacks feeling. And if you can make your audience feel something other than what a stupid, what a obnoxious advert that is, you don't want to make them feel negative about it. But if you can make them feel like, the examples I'm thinking of is things like, instead of just listing the features of a product, like you were saying, tap into the situations you would use that in, the memories it might create, like a holiday, rather than just saying there's a beach nearby, we've got 2 swimming pools and all you can eat food. Talk about a family time on holiday, into things that people can relate to, rather than just a list of stuff.
Yeah,
because it's not really of interest to anyone. It's all about making people feel something inside.
I think it's important to say as well, and I think a lot of when we talk about advertising, we talk about marketing as a whole, where it's about creating this brand loyalty to an extent, right? Humans as a whole are creatures of habit. We, in most cases, if you're more likely to go and buy Coca-Cola, once you have that first purchasing decision, that's going to cause a habit build. Whenever you go to buy a soft drink, you're more likely to buy one, right? And we use Coca-Cola because it's one of the largest brands in the world, and that's why you use it as an example. But the same can be true when we, bring it all the way back down to a micro business or a smaller business, solo entrepreneur, small business as well, because in some ways, it's the positioning you have in the industry, right? Are you the go-to fixer to that solution, right? Or do you create that solution for the person, that your ideal client, right? But why? Because I've talked about it at length on the show, but I've talked about it a lot as well, and I'm sure you've talked to your clients about it as well. We're in this economic challenge, you could say, at the moment, where costs are going up. Budgets are kind of not looking as fruitful as perhaps they were, say, 4, 5, 6, 7, even 10 years ago, or even during COVID when there was a large surplus of money. How can either marketers justify their costs, or as in create that understanding around their costs, or people who are looking to potentially maybe tweak their marketing budget, adapt their budgets, etc. I mean, what would you say to those people who are like on the fence about doing it? Because I think the people who are going to do it have done it, right? The ones who are just like, now we're good, we're going to go solo, we're going to do it ourselves, we're going to trade time instead of money, they've done it, right? So they're not necessarily there as of right now. I think there's still going to be people who still constantly evaluate how much they're spending on marketing and then where that marketing spend goes. So what would you say, I guess, in some ways, is the benefit, or should someone work with a creative rather than, your billboards, your telecompanies, your newspaper ads, etc., 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 in that regard?
I think for me, the obvious benefit of working with creatives, whether that's a one freelancer or or a team of people, is ideas. When you start to close yourself off from outside opinion and and brain power, that's when things can become very, for me personally, like very, very stale, I think, and inside the box thinking. So when you hire someone whose job is literally every day to think of new stuff, a new concept, and innovative videos, for example, to make them stand out from the rest, why wouldn't you tap into that?
Would you say that it's kind of, I guess in some ways goes back to that tribal point of not doing something outside of our comfort zone, right? Well, networking's worked, for example, for years and years and years and years and years. Me ringing people has worked for years and years and years and years and years. Me doing X, Y, and Z has worked for years and years and years and years. Why would I do this new thing, right? Do this video, do this voiceover, do this backflip, whatever it may be, right? This new thing, because I think there's a level of uncertainty that comes with it. Now, of course, that could be in a good way, because it could be, hey, look, the results are different. Hey, look, the results are better. But also, it's I guess the fear from some people's point of view of saying, what if it's not? What if it doesn't get me that result? What if it doesn't provide me what I need it to provide me? Especially if you're going to spend, whatever your yardstick is in regards to money.
Mhm. I think there's definitely fear in there, because some stuff can cost a fair chunk of money. And also, I think there can be stubbornness as well. If they've done something one way forever, like I've got an example where a local video production company was approaching lots of estate agents, and one estate agent they come across was very old school, and they'd been a family-run estate agent for 60 or 70 years. They said, we've never had videos, and we've done fine for decades. And then they just assumed that a video is, oh, this is our business, this is what we do, we're an estate agent. But everyone already knows that. So then at that point, the video production company came in with the ideas, like we were just talking about, to stop that narrow-minded thinking. So they were like, well, you could do it, you could use videos to do this, or explain this part of the business that nobody knows about, or to answer questions that people are always phoning about and wasting your time, or this, that, and the other. And they sort of opened their eyes and ended up looking into getting videos made in the end. So I think it's, fear of wasting money, of that they won't have any desired result or effects, or make no difference to the business. But definitely also a certain amount of old school thinking, and just, no, this is our way. We don't want anyone interfering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I would say anyway, and I'll hand back to you in a minute to hear your view, but I think it's our responsibility as creatives to say, hey, look, I appreciate what you're saying. I understand where you're coming from. I understand that you've done it this way for a million years, but have you thought about doing X? This is how you could potentially use it. This is where it could sit in your sales process. This is where you could use it for marketing, etc., etc. Have you thought about this platform? Did you know that XYZ percentage, the statistics are out there to be leveraged, right? The target audience you're trying to reach is there. And, we can create some content that can get their attention and can potentially, which is all of what we're talking about here in marketing, which is the positioning element, right? Positions you as the go-to expert. So a 95% we do in marketing, and, I'm probably not the first person to coin the term, but the term I've been using lately is, sales pays today, marketing pays tomorrow, right? And the thing is about that is you've got to do the marketing soon enough. So you can't leave it until you've got to have the sales in tomorrow, right? As in literally tomorrow, before you do the marketing, because marketing takes time to work, and it's a constant thing as well. You can't just do it once and then sort of ease up. So you need to make sure you're doing it sustainably. And what we would describe in video context as creating evergreen content, e.g. content that can serve you for years to come, not just a one hit wonder, so to speak. Of course, you can do specific campaigns around a specific objective that are more targeted in that regard, and they will be more one-hit wonder in that regard. But I think there's a lot of people who, I guess they don't have their head around the marketing, or they've done their marketing in such a way where it allows them or makes them think that they are going to get the return quickly. And whenever I talk to marketers, whenever I talk to voiceover artists, whenever I talk to other video production companies, there's, I think, an element to an extent which is more important, because we can sit here and talk in a sales call about, yeah, this is a good idea, etc., etc., etc. But are you walking the walk? Be the question I ask. I mean, how have you found like actually marketing yourself in correspondence to also, of course, running the business, doing the sales calls, sending out the emails, doing all the invoicing, doing all the other things that a business requires, right? How do you balance that personally? Because I think that's the distinguishing factor at the moment between the people who are still getting the work and are still busy. And that doesn't mean even those people have to necessarily, reduce cost or look at what they're doing or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because if you're not looking after your bottom line and you're not making sure there's enough profit there, you're going to go under whatever you're doing. But I think could be the distinguishing factor between the ones who come out in better shape and the ones who may be a bit more battered and bruised when it comes to when this does end and when things do get better. Because, it will, I think, is the important point to mention here as well really quickly, is it's going to, right? In most cases, if you look at history, economies go in 10-year cycles. We're currently in a process of contraction, meaning the economy is getting smaller. Okay, fine. But that means there'll also be a point where it's expanding again, right? So, I mean, just to reiterate the question, how do you balance I think the necessity now, because it's not really a luxury anymore, it's more a necessity of actually marketing yourself as a creative, as a person to hire, person to be hired in correspondence to actually getting the work done for clients?
There's so I'm thinking back to sort of 2020 when the first lockdown came into place, and lots of businesses just stopped doing stuff because they couldn't go out and, film stuff, for example, take photos.
Well, they were terrified, right? They didn't know where to work, where hay, where, why, hen, etc.
Yeah, exactly. But then there was the businesses that kept on marketing as well. So during those periods, I was still doing email campaigns, social media, everything that I was still doing. And for those reasons, down the line, those people still knew who I was. I was still front of mind. And I think that now I'm still in that mindset. If I don't have work, that's because I haven't done marketing enough. Yes, I will get repeat business, but what about those times where those companies don't need me, or they might not have any work, so they can't hire anyone? So I think it's important, even when you're doing the work, find time to do something in terms of marketing, whether it's sending 5 emails a day or posting on social media so that you are continuously showing up. There's another example, like last year, someone left a networking group that I was in because they said, I'm not making enough money, so I can't justify the membership at the minute. My first thought was, well, if you're not making enough money, by removing yourself from a group with 40 people in it, that's 40 less people now that are going to be able to help you, because you're not going to be front of their mind every week when they see you. So it's always input, like showing up is the term that I would use, I think.
And I think
in whichever way you can.
And I think that's a really important thing, and it's a really important mindset question as well, because, you've had it, I've had it, everyone's had it. I think who's been in business long enough, we have those darker days where you need to create income, and there isn't necessarily a solution that is there, but the solution comes when you do the work, right? When you show up, when you create that piece of content. And just quickly on that networking question, I think it's an important distinction to make, whether, because sometimes, and speaking personally, I've moved away from networking groups because I don't feel that there's enough yield, which is what we're talking about here, from that networking group necessarily. And I'm replacing it with a different strategy, right? So changing strategically is not the same as I'm going to, remove the cost of this, because that might be a legitimate reason why they have to do that, right? It might be a legitimate cost-cutting measure because they need to cut how much they have going out to be able to survive for 3, 4, 6, 7 months, whatever, right? The question I would have is, what are you going to replace that spend with? Because now you have this investment of time, potentially. You have to do something else that could be, is that leaning on the network you've already got, perhaps? Is that having more one-to-ones? Is that actually creating more content? Is that starting a YouTube channel? Is that starting a blog post? Right? So it's not just I remove this and then I'm good. situation, in my view. I think if you're going to do that, that's a fair question, and that's a fair point to be made, because sometimes, as we say, you have to cut costs where possible, right? And I think actually the question that a networking group should ask is what value this perceived reality, but that what value do they add to their users, and or if you're a user of a networking group, any networking group, do you still feel you're getting the value for your membership, right? And if you could be potentially spending that time, energy, resources, or money on, is paid ads a better approach? Is hiring someone with that money to do blog writing? Is, putting a pot together of all that money, so then you can potentially then go and hire someone like yourself or someone like me to do a brand video for you, or create a social media campaign or an advertising campaign, etc. All these other options that we have. And something for the audience to consider is whoever you're talking to is going to have a biased opinion on what the best marketing strategy is to do. Right? So I'm going to say do video because it's what I specialize in. You're going to say do voiceover because it's what you specialize in. And a networking group's going to say come and join a networking group. The reality is going to be actually what I would say you need to ask yourself what you enjoy the most. Because what you enjoy the most is more likely to keep the consistency, and you're more likely to do it. If you love creating content and you love helping people and you love talking to people, like I do, for example, that's why I have a podcast show. That's why I do all the things I do with content, because I love sharing that process and it's something I really enjoy doing. It's the way I can stay consistent, and it's not then tied to, this video didn't do very well. Because yes, potentially it might not get the views I want it to right now, but I'm investing in it so for the long term it can build an audience larger than it already is, but also in a position where actually, regardless of what happens with the new exploration side of the audience, it's feeding my social channels. It's also allowing me to stay really sharp when it comes to interviewing people. So there's lots of what I would call sub skills, right? In the same with if you're an editor in your video production company and work slower, you should still be creating content. The question to you is, I guess, how do you create voiceover stuff for yourself when things are quieter? And if so, why do you do that? Because I think it's very easy for us to sit on our morals and go, we're just going to sit here and wait for the email box to ping or the phone to ring, right?
Yeah, so I do, not as much as I should probably, but I do create some voiceover pieces every now and then to show what I do, because otherwise, if I'm just posting text content or photos on LinkedIn, it doesn't actually show my skill. It shows my personality, yes, but not everyone will want to know that sort of thing. I went through a phase of doing really short, funny sketches, not voiceover. It was me in front of the camera, because I thought it was really important for people to know who I am as a person. If they don't like me as a person, they probably don't want to work with me. I don't want to work with them, which is fine. But over time, I realized that they also need to know about the voiceover side of it, not just me messing about in front of camera, which was great fun, but ultimately was possibly the wrong route to go down. But I think it's important to have those pieces of content mixed in with lots of other bits and pieces to literally show off what you do.
I just want to specifically talk about a specific point you made, and you said it was quote unquote wrong to do sketches. In an exploring process, whenever you create content, I never believe that it's wrong to do something, right? Because even if the content isn't what you think it's going to be, and even if you don't think it's a good idea in hindsight, you only know that because you did it and you got data from it, right? Whether that was your own data looking at it and going, actually, this isn't really for me, I don't really enjoy this anymore. And content pivots and changes, right? But, and there's a couple of things I want to talk about what you just mentioned, which are really important. One of which, as I say, is you can't really do it wrong, because especially at the beginning, you have to chuck a load of stuff against the wall and see what sticks. The issue, I think, sometimes is we tie ourselves to vanity metrics to say, that video got loads of views, etc., etc., etc. I think, for me personally anyway, some of the best videos that have really performed in regards to what really, really help my potential clients actually become clients, as in that conversion process over to them becoming clients, has been videos that get 10 views. Right? Or 5 views or 15 views, because it doesn't overly matter. Yeah, of course, we would love to have more people of the right people to consume the content. Of course we would. But never forget, the people who give it watch time won't always necessarily be in the likes and the comments, right? Yeah, you should also have those, and they're great to have. But the people who are potentially going to hire you may not necessarily be in those likes and comments, but they're still consuming your content. They're still seeing your face. They're still watching the content, right? And very quick story there. I went on a shoot this week and I was recognized by half the crew. It was for a theatre performance that we were doing a promotional piece for. And half of the cast already knew who I was just because of content. Right now, some of them had met me at previous events because it's a client we've worked with for a couple of years. But some of the new guys and girls that were there didn't know who I was in the same depth, right? But they did because of the content that I put out and I post, right? So they recognized me. They were like, "I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from somewhere?" And we got to the end of it and they realized, well, they've seen X, Y, Z. They've seen a podcast here, or they've seen like this, etc. So I think it's more overarching, and sometimes, as I say, it comes back to that time window that we give it. Sometimes I think we're so social media is designed to be this highlight reel of, oh my god, endorphins, oh my god, I got loads of likes, oh my god, I got etc., right? Which of course, but when we look at it from a business context, we have to give it a time window. And that isn't to say we can leave it there for years and it not do anything for us. It's about understanding it's not going to happen overnight, right? And I think, I mean, how did you have that mindset when you started marketing? Was it like, I need this to work tomorrow? Or if you, if you teach your clients or work with your clients to understand that it is a longer process, how do you help them understand that longer process? Because I think that's the main hurdle that a lot of marketers sometimes come into when they're dealing with what I would call novice marketers or business owners that maybe haven't done their sector of marketing before and or haven't done marketing outsourced before either.
So the two main things that I started off doing were networking, which we've spoken about. And actually, I had someone come back to me yesterday he wants to talk about a project. And I first met him 3 years ago. And since then, we've just chatted on LinkedIn. No work has passed between us. But now 3 years later, he's come back and said, right, as a project, which goes back to what we're saying about, staying relevant and in front of people. And the other one, so that was, a very long game. And then the other one is SEO for my website. And that is an ongoing long game. It's just continual trying to build up your rankings. So in terms of understanding that it's not, I mean, it can be an instant thing. I've done events where I go along and someone says, "Oh, I need you now." But it's very, in my industry, at least, very rare that happens. So I understand that things take time and you can't just expect someone to see you once, understand everything about why they should use your service and then buy. So in terms of clients, most of my clients, I'm fortunate enough that they know why they need voiceover because they're already in that area. But to convince someone who, I don't know, an accountant, for example, why he might want a professionally recorded business telephone message might take me, a considerable amount of time because they're just like, well, I'll just do it myself. It's my business. Why not just have my voice on the phone? And then that's my job to then educate them as to why, because why would they know? They're an accountant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really important point, and that's kind of what I alluded to earlier about when it came to it's our job as creatives to articulate the value in what we offer, right? Because I don't think look, sometimes you'll win the lottery in that regard, like you've already mentioned, where, but that's the outcrop, or that's the 1%, right? Where I've had it where I go to a networking meeting or I catch up with someone and then 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 20 minutes, 2 days, whatever, the phone rings and they've got a job for me. Right, I remember it, multiple times and multiple examples, but I think that's not what you should bet on. I think what you should technically bet on is the work you can control, and this is a larger question around: do you focus on what you can control, but also things about hot topic-esque and things we can't control is obviously the elephant in the room, which is AI. Right, we discussed it a little bit in the pre-show about your work potentially in this AI model around like cloning voices, etc., etc., etc. I mean, how has the shaken up kind of happened in AI? Because my view, I've said it multiple times, but really quickly for those who are new, it's this situation which we've had in technology before, which is a technological advancement happens, it completely wipes out a percentage of jobs. Okay, that's unfortunate. That's the way of the world, right? Because from a cost point of view, from a time point of view, from an efficiency point of view, from a mistakes point of view, there's going to be a set of things that technology can do better than a human. Okay, because it's a computer. It will just go, yep, I do this. Yep, I do this. Yep, I do this. Also, right? You don't have to pay it for holidays. You don't need to give it holidays. It doesn't get sick, right? Things like this, right? Now, I'm not saying you should fully replace everything with a computer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like everything in a market, it changes and adapts. And if you're not willing to change and adapt as a business to leverage AI and use AI as a tool, because AI is just the newest version of technology growth, right? This concept of innovation and becoming more useful through technology and becoming more efficient, quote unquote, with what we do. I mean, should we be scared of it? Are people in your industry scared of it?
I think to start with, because even though AI voice has been around for a long time, it really sort of came to, into public view very strongly last year, especially into the voiceover world, when lots and lots of things started happening very quickly and everyone was talking about it. And I would say, just in my own experience of the people that I know in the area, 60-70% of them were, a little bit worried, shall we say, because why wouldn't someone pick a very, very cheap, fast voice for pennies over someone who's going to charge them, the going rate? But over time, I think people have kind of taken the opinion that, yes, they're getting better and will still continue to get better. But that just means that we have to get better and make sure that we're always still an improvement upon the AI, specifically about the AI voices at the moment, because voice actors can act, but AI voices can narrate. They can't necessarily take on the parts of characters, put in strong emotions and flick between different emotions at the drop of a hat and all that stuff. So for me, it's just important that I keep continuing to try and improve myself and better myself in what I do, so that I'm trying to keep ahead of the quality, if that makes sense. But then I'm also trying to use AI to my advantage as well, because I understand that I will come across people who say, well, you're a bit expensive. Well, okay, but you picked me for my voice. I can now offer you a cheaper option, which is a replica of my voice. So it just gives me, in a way, more opportunities. It can help me, like you mentioned about, they don't go on holiday. AI doesn't go on holiday, but I will. But if someone needs something really quickly, even if it's just an audition, I can send a replica of my voice whilst I'm on holiday, rather than having to lug my recording stuff about. But there's still fear, and I think there always will be, especially maybe from those who have been in the industry for so long, like we were talking about, people stuck in their ways and stubborn. They will refuse to use any form of AI. Like I was talking to someone yesterday and they were using ChatGPT for the first time. And for me, that blew my mind, because why wouldn't you have had a little play with it just to see what everyone was talking about and to see if you can enhance your processes and drive efficiency?
Yeah. And I think, and as you mentioned ChatGPT, I think, there's a lot of conversations about should you use it, how should you use it, etc., etc., etc. And I think there's going to be a middle ground for everyone. And, speaking personally, we tried literally getting it to write everything. And then we now use it to more check what we're doing and be an asset rather than necessarily completely. But you had to go through that process of testing to see what works, see what the reaction was like, etc., etc., etc. But I think that's the important point, right? It's an asset like anything else. A camera is an asset. A microphone is an asset. It's a tool, right? It's the key there. And I think, yeah, sure, we're going to talk about AI as of today, and then by tomorrow it will have changed and updates and then, neither of us qualified enough to talk about the other threats of AI when it becomes, basically the ability to rewrite itself and then become superhuman, and we're in Terminator style and we're all going to die, right? Which potentially might happen, potentially might not, but neither of us are qualified enough to talk about that, so that's why I don't. What I look at is what's happening in the market and how people are potentially using it, and I think there is always going to be a world where you still hire a copywriter. There's still going to be a world where you hire a production company. There's still going to be a world where you need a human doing the voiceover. Is AI going to become better? Absolutely. It's going to be part of our systems and our processes. We're seeing it in Premiere at the moment. We're seeing it in editors. I'm sure you're seeing it in audio tuning, etc., 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 where it's AI accelerated. It's using that technology to do the job more efficiently. That's not a bad thing if you're willing to accept that. And I think, and I've had some people who dislike this view online, but unfortunately, if you are worried about AI, question how good you are in comparison to it, right? Because if you can't distinguish yourself to your client, or can't prove to your client or articulate to your client that you are a better solution than ChatGPT, for example, should you win the client? Would be my question. Can you really add value to that client?
It's a really, really good point. And I think the other side of it is that, again, comes back to the experts in their individual sectors, like video production or voiceover or whatever, can be the ones to educate people about using the AI stuff. Because, for example, I was talking to someone literally this morning. He needed what sounded like Siri or something like that, a voice like that. And I said, well, there's AI voices that can do this, that, and the other. So I sent him something across, and he said, oh, can you have it so that it goes up at the end and down in the middle, or whatever it was he was saying? I said, well, actually, no, because what you generate, it comes out as is. You can't do too much with it. But it's me to suggest to him, but this could mean this could mean that. I'm the voice expert. This is how it should sound. It's there will always be the experts in their field. So you was talking about copywriters, for example. So someone can get a blog churned out through ChatGPT, but if they're not a writer themselves, they won't know whether that particularly sounds good or not. But a copywriter still will. So, work with the copywriter to at least proof it and edit it, rather than just flipping fully over to AI.
Yeah. And I think, as I say, it's one of those tool questions around should you use it as a tool? Some people are just saying no. I think you should at least play with it, see what it can do, and then build systems and processes around how you leverage it and how you use it. If we had this conversation 5 months ago, I'd probably be using ChatGPT or AI a lot more than I think I was actually going to now, right? Now that might flip and change, right? I'm constantly looking at, and I actually allocate time, and I'd recommend anyone else listening to this allocates a percentage of their weekly time to looking into what I call innovation time, which is doing research on other production companies, doing research on the tools, doing research on where AI is now, what's the new tool, what's the new idea, what's the new this, what's the new that, because it allows you to constantly stay ahead. And this is what I mean when I say you need to do this to stay alive, because it's the way you can either ride the wave of AI or you can get killed by it. It's up to you, right? But the crux, I don't subscribe to the ideology that we're all going to be out of a job because of AI. If your job is valuable enough, you'll be fine. The question or the issue, and there's of course other larger issues that I've already alluded to, right, that will eventually, I would believe, at least from an optimistic point of view, all work itself out eventually. The reality, though, is AI is not going to go anywhere. Right? It's here to stay. In the same way, the internet wasn't going to go anywhere when it started either, right? We're still here. And the same way, Zoom, Skype, Teams, whatever you want to call it, conferencing, meetings, etc., from the pandemic, hybrid working, all these kind of culture shift changes that were like very no before the pandemic are now, yeah, this can work. Yeah, why am I driving 3 hours to have a meeting with you when I can have it in half an hour in the comfort of my own home or in my office, right? Why am I doing that? That's inefficient. That's ridiculous. But this is in crux, the evolution of the market, the space, the business. And if you, unfortunately, want to stay in pre-pandemic, whatever, pre-internet, whatever, I'm not saying don't leverage those. If that's where your audience is and it's cost effective and in regards to the attention you gain and that's going to work for your business, do it. Not knock yourself out. I think the question should be, is this the best use of time, energy, and resources to get the result you're looking for, potentially? And or are you thinking too much in your own box and are you playing safe too much? Because I think sometimes we don't push ourselves out of our comfort zone because it's uncomfortable, right? That's why we're not doing it. Not because we couldn't potentially get results, not because potentially it wouldn't work, just because we feel uncomfortable. I mean, how did you, because look, you're a voiceover artist, right? So you must be confident with the concept of speaking, right? How did you get comfortable with the concept of articulating your value to someone? Because whether you're doing content or not, you need to know how to do that. Because you have a sales call, you have a meeting call, you have a networking meeting, you have a conversation with someone. And I think there's a lot of people who potentially are either starting out in business or in business now that don't spend that time polishing that bit and don't really know and are really confident in, this is why I'm really good, this is how I'm really good, and actually practice it. Because you know it in your head, right? But I don't think a lot of people, unless they create content regularly, they're necessarily going to practice it.
Yeah, mine came through networking. Like during 2020, I did so many different networking events online, hundreds and hundreds, that I was, pitching to probably nearly, I don't know, 500-600 people a week about why voiceover is a good idea. So it just became like second nature almost. I did in a way feel eventually I got bored of my own, not my own voice, but my own pitching and talking about the value and that sort of stuff, which is why then I started making my pitches a bit more sort of interactive and interesting, more highlighting specific parts of what I do. But it is a tricky thing if someone has never considered voiceover as a thing. So before I started voiceover, I would watch TV or listen to the radio and an advert came on and it was just an advert. And I would consume that as the audience. Whereas not until I got into the industry did I really start picking it apart. And now I can't listen to the radio without dissecting all of the adverts that come on. I'm thinking, oh, I wouldn't have done it like that. Or, oh, that's good. And getting people who are in the mindset that I was originally, not knowing anything about it, can be a tough egg to crack. Really can. But it's, again, like we've said, it's the point of always showing up, always banging on that door until it does click, because that's what happened with me when I started voiceover. It eventually clicked in my head as well, and then the journey got faster.
And that's, I think, a really important point, right? And something that I say to people who, as I say, I've had the review meetings, you've had the review, everyone's had those review meetings regarding costs, regarding do we continue with clients, etc., for whatever reason, right? But I think it's one of those principles where it's like, have you considered you could be one video away? You could be one voice note away. You could be one pitch away. You could be one written post away from that person who's lurking, consuming your content, but not necessarily liking, commenting, sharing, etc., right? From actually picking up the phone and ringing you or dropping you a message or saying, hey, X, I love what you do. I've been following you for 6 months. We need what you do now. Can we have a conversation, right? And, are you one step away? You might not be, right? But you don't know until you continue. And that's not to say don't look at the data, don't adapt, don't change. Sure. But actually ask yourself, how much do you value it? And, I could give you a lot of analogies, but the analogy I'm following right now is how important, how excited, how much of an emphasis or how much priority is that client putting on what the work you do with them is. Right? And if you could mark that, 0 being not at all, and 10 being let's go, let's do it, fantastic, you should be looking to work with the people and invest your time and energy into the people who are closer to 10 constantly with every service you do, rather than the people who are at 0. Now, it sounds stupid, right? But you actually sometimes don't do that, because sometimes you'll chase the leads, the conversations, the meetings with the people who are like 2, 3, maybe 4, right? Instead of really laser focusing on the 5-6 people who you know are there, but you potentially are, we've only got so much time, we've only got so much energy, who are on 8, 9 or 10, right? And I believe anyway, you can make a lot more money if you focus on those 8, 9 and 10s in regards to the people who really, really, really want to work with you and really are championing what you do. Whether they're high ticket value to you doesn't actually matter, because they could be the best referral partner you've ever got. If you just do that small job, or you actually just make that really good connection, or your good introduction, or et cetera, in that regard. I mean, how do you, I guess in some ways, vet who you work with, right? Because I think it's something which a lot of people struggle to do because they're in a scarcity, as in there is not a lot of work necessarily. And they're like, for me, I look at sales calls as, let's see if there's mutual ground. Let's see if there's mutual respect to us working together. Not, hey, client, please work with me. Please pay me this money. I personally see it as a more balanced conversation around, are we a good fit? Do you value what we do? And or vice versa, as in, are you going to knock me down on price? Are you going to are you going to question the value we add? Are you going to listen to me as an expert? Are you going to respect me as an expert, etc.? All those things, rather than, I guess in some ways, you having to pull the magic out of the hat, or the rabbit out of the hat, so to speak, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and there's been a few things recently where I've said I would much rather say yes to having a conversation with someone at the first instance, because you never know where that conversation might lead. So at face value, I was speaking to someone who I'd met because I was hosting a webinar for someone. And they said, oh, I saw you doing the stuff in the background, interested in audio or whatever it was they said. Can we have a chat? I thought, great. And she works in end of life care for people that are dying. So it's a very sort of heavy industry, and seemingly, I thought, literally no links there for me whatsoever, because she goes into someone's house, looks after them in their last weeks and days of life, and then goes again. So, well, where can voiceover fit in there? But we had a really, really great conversation for about an hour or so, talking about the power of voice for people who perhaps don't have the energy left to talk themselves. So hearing their families' voices and that sort of thing. And then messages from those who have died to leave their voice behind for other people. So we started talking about some new ideas where recordings of like legacy audio. So you get the people who know they're terminal to start recording stuff. And this came out of a collaboration mindset between two completely different businesses hitting on something. Actually, there is a link there. So I think it's really important to have those conversations. And for me, I think it's from habit of networking, I will never say no to a conversation with someone until it's very, very obvious that there's nothing to be done. But there's often links in places that you least expect it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And I think sometimes we sit there and we filter it. I think we go, oh, this person's never going to hire me. This person's not going to have the connections with me, etc. So we are less likely to invest the same. I think there is a point, though, which is knowing when it's beating a dead horse, though, right? Which is kind of where I got to with the whole, 0 to 10 point, right? Which is actually the energy and the priority what you and that person are doing sit for the other person, right? And also, I guess, in some ways asking and also being very honest with yourself and saying, look, is this the kind of work you want to be doing? Number one. Number two, are you in a financial position where you can say no? Sometimes you're not, sometimes you are. But also number three, if you're not, take that question and say, okay, I need to do this regardless of how good I feel about it, because I need to make the money, right? We've all had it, etc., right? But then ask yourself the larger question, which is how did I get myself in this position in the first place? Because you have to fix that so you're not back there again next month, right? Because once you've done that, you can then make meaningful change, whether that's to your costs, whether that's to how you operate, what you're operating, whether you're operating, etc., right? So you have a better path, a better vision, a better life plan for you, right? Because at the end of the day, and, I was listening to some stuff this morning about this as well. It's actually about what your vision is, and the concept of happiness as a whole, if you're going to use that as a yardstick, is your expectations of your reality are matched, if they're matched, you're happy. If they're not matched, as in the expectations you had didn't happen, right? So the person that showed up on time, right? So you showed up perfectly on time, hurrah. But let's say you didn't, that would potentially make me feel not happy because my expectation was, great, cool, we're going to do the podcast at 12 o'clock, fantastic. And then my expectations weren't met, right? So that's going to change how I feel. But the same is true when we do business. The same is true when we show up. The same is true when we have content. And that's why I said at the beginning, when you're doing marketing, when you're considering what you're doing, do you really enjoy networking with beings? Like, really, be honest with yourself. Do you enjoy them? Do you enjoy being extroverted? Do you enjoy talking to new people, right? Sure, great, fantastic. Do you enjoy creating content? Do you enjoy writing blog posts? Do you enjoy being on a podcast? Do you enjoy having a talk show, etc., etc., all these things, right? Because once you understand that, you're more likely to do it. And then your expectations of what you do daily is going to be, and I try and ground myself in, I'm very grateful to still be in the position I'm in, but also understand that there's still work I need to do, right? And I think as a final point to potentially, for the audience to take away and think about is your current reality where you want it to be in regards to your lifestyle? And if it isn't, what do you need to change to get to that lifestyle that you want? If you value freedom or you value control or you value this, is that job necessarily going to serve you? Or is that business necessarily going to serve that purpose? Because sometimes we go into business thinking we're going to have all this freedom and all this control, and it ends up we don't for whatever reason, because we have to take the jobs we don't like. We actually end up being underpaid in comparison to what we could be doing at a job, etc. I mean, do you find that a lot of it is around vision with your clients? Because I think once you get clear on the vision with you and your client, a lot of the friction can be removed.
It's I've been thinking about this all the way through, really. Like for voiceover, I think it's a little bit different because most of the time the client is already in the buying mindset. They just need to find the right voice. So it's obviously my job to persuade them that my voice is the right voice, but they're already in the, well, we need a voiceover. So I get video production companies or radio ad agencies or e-learning companies say, right, we've got this, we need voiceover, are you the right one? And then the main method for that is to provide an audition. So rather than pitching to them or even having a meeting with them, sometimes the only thing that I've got in my arsenal is an email response with an audio file attached. So coming back to the vision thing, if I could do the best audition in the history of auditions, but if it's not the idea they've got in their head of how they want it to sound, then I'm just not going to get it. And that's all there is to it, especially if there's hundreds of people going for the same thing. So the client's vision, sometimes there's nothing that I can do about that, other than hit and hope, numbers game, but I'm trying to think of times where I've had like a call with a potential client, and it's more likely to come down to things like business telephone messages, that sort of stuff, where they're a bit like, well, do I really need it? I can just record it myself. Well, yes, you can. And I can give you some ideas on how to make it sound better, but it won't have the audio quality, the timing, the breathing, all of that sort of stuff properly. And can you mix it with music for on hold if you need it? And then it becomes apparent why, they might actually need someone else to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that opens up a large question that I wanted to ask you to end the show on, which is, everyone in business, if you're pitching anything or in general, you're going to have points where you get it wrong. You're going to have points where you're rejected, right? How do you handle rejection? Right? You go for the audition, you go for that job. Nah, you're actually not the voice. Nah, actually it doesn't work for us.
It's with voiceover, because I came from an industry where I was removed from any sort of business winning. I was just a cog. I dealt with data processing sort of stuff. So it was just blind to anything that was happening business wise. And coming into voiceover, where it's very competitive, and like you say, you have to win the work from auditioning a lot of the time, it was very tough, because you think you spend some time on that audition. At the beginning, you spend far too much time on the auditioning process. to what you think is an excellent standard, and to get a no or to not get any response whatsoever can feel like a very personal attack, even if it's just because they didn't have time to listen to all of the auditions. But over time, you find that actually it doesn't matter. There'll be other work for me out there. I'm just not right for that job. And most of the time, it's just one person's opinion. So it's, who are they? I'm probably never going to meet them. Might never even speak to them, even on a call. So it's a case of the pain decreasing over time by exposing yourself to it more and more. I've been really strong over the past few years in putting myself in situations that I'm uncomfortable with. And a couple of years ago, doing something like this with someone who we had a 10-minute chat beforehand would have been a complete no-no. But that's the only way to learn and build and progress. So yeah, always, 9 times out of 10 say yes to stuff. But yeah, going back to building the thick skin is what it's about. And then eventually you'll think nothing of it. You'll send off the audition. If they get back to you, amazing. If not, who cares?
I think the important point I'll add in here or add to that conversation is going to be, what is your emotional attachment to the outcome, right? And or can you control the outcome, right? All you can do is do the best pitch, the best deck, the best audition, the best sales call, whatever that you can do. If that ends up with you winning the job, fan-fucking-tastic. That ends up meaning you don't win the job, fan-fucking-tastic. Because you're either gifted with time or you're gifted with a new project. That's it. They're the only two realities in my view. Now, of course, there's things you can learn from those things, right? And that's why we should look and document our sales calls somehow, so we can reflect back on those and say, okay, well, when I was asked this question, did I misstep, etc., 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 potentially, or look into more detail on how to do decks and do that research. And that's why I have that innovation time, so I can look and see what are my other industry people, what are the people in my industry doing, right? Etc. Something that I've just had an idea of is, normally, traditionally, you go and put a deck together to pitch for a job for a video production wise. What if we did that as video? Just going to throw that out there. It's not a state secret. Might try it. Don't know. Just came to the idea, so I thought I'd throw it on the end. But for those who've really enjoyed this conversation and would like to connect with you, where's best to do that? How's best to do that? Etc. Etc. Anything else you want to plug? Go for it.
So yeah, LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. It's just my full name, Martin Whiskin, which is WHISKIN, and my full name is my website.co.uk.
Fantastic. And for those who have taken this conversation and really, really enjoyed it, and they either maybe starting a business or moving forward in their business, what, if you were going to give advice, would you give them as a takeaway kind of actionable point or a thing to think about as they move forward in 2024?
I think what we touched on, probably at vast detail in the middle, was always show up, because keeping your face in people's minds, they might not need you for 3 years, for 5 years, for 2 months. But if you're there continuously in front of them, you'll be the first person that they remember.
Thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode. If you did, I would love to hear what you think in the comment section down below. I'll be back very, very soon with some brand new content to help you continue to move forward in your business in 2024, because we're going to create the demand instead of necessarily serving that market demand for you and your business and your needs in regards to your bottom line, and actually create marketing that really helps that bottom line in the mid and long term. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again. I'd love to hear what you think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you very, very soon.